The last generation RS6 powered solely by an engine made sure that it would be one to remember. This C8 generation faced some of the toughest regulations and emissions laws ever imposed on a car, but it didn't fail to deliver the classic RS6 mixture of an all-year, all-season, all-circumstances performance for you and your family to enjoy, including FIDO. The RS6 is introduced across the world in a staggered date order, but orders opened in late 2019 for the UK and Europe, with the deliveries at the beginning of 2020. The Australians had to wait until June before the first cars arrived, and in a long-awaited return to the USA, deliveries began in September of 2020. There is no facelift for this RS6, however, an announcement followed the launch that a performance specification model would be released in 2023. This entered sale in the UK and select European markets in December 2022, with the USA and Australia opening the order books in mid-2023 for deliveries later that year. Once all countries received the performance model, the standard version was dropped, handing off sales to the performance, this acting as a de facto midlife update for the RS6. The Rennsport 6 moved to a mild hybrid for the C8 generation. This system can recover up to 16 brake horsepower of energy, but does not drive the car, and instead utilizes the alternator starter that many will be familiar with. The 48-volt system boosts engine off coasting to improve fuel efficiency in everyday driving on the RS6, rather than helping to spin up the turbos like the SQ7. Used buyers should note that there are a variety of specifications, however most are market dependent, and while there are some trims like the Launch Edition to Carbon Black and Vorsprung, there are also the Performance Carbon Black and Performance Carbon Vorspring. All of these package options from the original model, and aside from the Launch Edition, were not sold in limited numbers. After this, there is the Nagaro Edition, or RS Tribute as called in the USA. This car is very rare, just 25 units in the USA called RS Tribute, and the European or world equivalent was near impossible to narrow down a number, but Audi Exclusive mentioned a Nagaro Blue Edition in a press pack about the exclusive car lineup. My guess will be a handful of examples exist. Many of you will be aware that the last version and a swan song of this generation is the GT. Introduced in 2024 and limited to 660 units worldwide, 85 for the USA, 60 for the UK, and because I regularly mention the Aussies but not the New Zealanders, I found that 13 of these were sent to New Zealand, but they were all specified in Nardo Grey or Mythos Black, rather than the ones you have seen in the press releases, which were inspired by the IMSA GTO Audi 90 race car. The GT adds height adjustable coilovers, a retuned rear differential, and carbon fibre front wings or fenders and bonnet. There is also a 22-inch set of wheels exclusive to the GT over the RS ceramic brakes, then GT bucket seats and a standard RS design package plus interior complete the look. But I know while this is nice to know that most of you will be deciding between a regular or a competition specification, really this is a separation of age and thus budget, but the competition benefits from a power boost, reduced insulation to save 8 kilograms or 17 pounds of weight, larger but lighter 22-inch wheels, and a new center differential. I will talk about power in the engine section later, but something important to note: while many debate that the competition model had extensive hardware changes, it is only the turbochargers that change part specification, moving from a 701 and 702 with letters up to H for the end of the turbo part numbers to 701 and 702 with a J in the later models. This allows for an increased boost from 2.4 to 2.6 bar. The rest of the engine retains early part numbers, and there's no press release that states that the larger intercoolers or changes to the heads or the ports. I should stress though that while now Audi use the part number ending in J for replacements, there isn't a 100% clear part number code for the non-performance models, likely due to minor revisions over production that were not related to the performance capability of the turbo. If you are viewing a 2023 car and a seller is telling you it is a performance model, but it doesn't have the larger wheels, the easy way to check is the engine code that should be on the vehicle registration book. Code DJPB or DYGP are the standard RS6 engine, and the performance models should get code DYGA. An aside here for US buyers is that you do get a louder exhaust whether or not you go for one with an RS Sport exhaust, as US models are sold without an OPF or GPF in the exhaust, while Europeans and countries that receive European specification cars have these mandated and find they muffle the engine noise. RS Sport exhausts do release some sound, but companies like Miltech and Akrapovic sell an OPF back exhaust that can bring back some of the rumble and keep you legal. Although many markets had packages as mentioned earlier to bundle additional specification, common optional extras picked when new were Dynamic Ride Control or DRC, Bang & Olufsen advanced speakers, HD matrix LED headlights, RS Sport exhaust, carrying option code OP6, panoramic glass roof, 22-inch wheels coded 53F, night vision assist, and for cold climate areas the heated acoustic windscreen coded 4GR. The ceramic brakes and tow bar prep kit were rarer but not unheard of, and carbon inlays coded 5MK were commonly seen on carbon spec cars but could be optioned individually. Moving on to safety, and the RS6 was not specifically crash tested, but the regular A6 model that it is based on achieved a full 5 stars at Euro NCAP. Next up are the common faults, and a reminder that the regular A6 and S6 have already had a guide in the channel, which is worth watching to check out information specific to the general car, whereas here we'll focus on the RS common complaints. Water ingress into the floor will be a plug missing or damaged on the underbody that needs the car up in the air to seal up. Feel the rear carpets underneath the mats, and if it's not rained for a while, look for any staining. This isn't expensive in parts, but labour time can mount up for a shop to make sure they have sealed everything perfectly. The wireless charging pad may not be something that you would think to check on a 600 brake horsepower superwagon when buying, but if your phone won't charge, then it is likely you're facing a thermal cutoff stopping it operating, or the MMI isn't recognising a device. If you are lucky, it will be a simple reboot. If not, you'll have to replace the pad, which is more expensive than you might think. A blank screen or missing map on the navigation will likely be an update that is stuck in process and cannot complete. A good specialist should have the equipment to force a reboot of the software. If fitted with a panoramic roof, there have been numerous complaints. The first will be a noise or a rattle. Some owners say it can creak on bumpy roads in the cold. The dealer resolution is to lubricate the rails and then check for any headliner updates across the model years for a variety of workaround answers. Ultimately, it does get sorted, but can be tricky and time-consuming to resolve. Now, if the RS6 you go to view has 22-inch wheels, you need to check the inner edge on all 4 tyres, as these are quite easy to misalign, and the factory has a mild aggressive camber that will just about keep the tyres true, but a few big bumps in the road and they'll either be a bit too aggressive or they'll start pulling to one side. Now, specialists know how to set these cars up, but local tyre shops generally have too much tolerance, and unless they see these cars regularly, then they'll likely add a point or two of additional camber to keep the car driving like the owner expects. But as these tyres aren't cheap, and because they wear on the inner edge when set up like this, most people won't notice unless they regularly check their tyres, meaning there's a big bill waiting for you. The mild hybrid system has caused several complaints, mainly a no-start issue that owners have said led to multiple alternator changes. You can search belt starter generator Audi RS6 for more details, but I'll save you time. If it is an updated part from November 2024, it will start with part number 4N1. The older, less reliable ones start 4N0. Common complaints from owners that aren't necessarily a fault are high amounts of brake dust on the steel brakes, some brake noise from cold on steel brakes, a rattle from the dash that doesn't appear to affect any particular year or country, but a few owners have experienced it, the MMI dropping Apple CarPlay and Android Auto halfway into a journey, and some misting in the front and rear lights on cold mornings, but they shouldn't have heavy condensation and shouldn't be there unless the conditions are damp and cold. Looking through owner feedback, overall there have been a few issues here or there, but they aren't that common, and the pros appear to vastly outweigh the complaints for many owners. Moving on to the recalls, and a reminder to add a like if the video is useful, as this should help others also looking for an RS6 be recommended this guide. There was a single recall in 2020 due to early production cars having a front door crash sensor that risked detaching at the connector. In 2021, there were 3 recalls, one for a small batch of cars having an improperly fitted airbag, the other due to a rear axle trailing arm bolt being out of specification. The last recall of 2021 was a small batch of cars that had the engine block casting made with a defect. Audi replaced the entire engine on affected vehicles. In 2022, there were 4 recalls. The first is a simple follow-up check of the rear axle bolt and nut to make sure that it had been repaired correctly. The second, a fuel sender sticking issue that may have stopped it working. The third, a rear view camera software update, as some owners had blank screens when reversing. And then the last was a module under the rear seats shutting down due to reported water ingress. Both the water ingress and the module had to be resolved at the same time. In 2023, a brake fluid reservoir cap was recalled in some markets due to a wrong label, and in 2025, virtual cockpit software update recalls were addressed a panel suddenly going blank in some cars. Next up is the reason many of you want to buy the RS6, the engine. Audi knew they had to deliver something special for this generation RS6, and so the 4-litre V8 twin-turbo engine coded DJPB, that was then changed to DYGB in the later standard RS6 cars before the performance model arrived. These have 591 brake horsepower and average 22.2 miles per gallon or 12.7 litres per 100 kilometres. The later performance models take on engine code DYGA and have 621 brake horsepower with the same fuel economy, and the late model GT makes a lot of chassis changes but keeps the performance model engine and its figures. There are a range of maintenance items that you should look out for on any potential purchase, as not only will it tell you if an owner really cared for the car, but it will have an effect on the long-term longevity of the engine. This counts double for cars running a high-power tune. The spark plugs must be changed on time, and the limit for this is 40,000 miles or 60,000 kilometers or 6 years. Many owners don't cover that many miles in their RS6, and so the 6-year interval is critical. And a reminder, this is the longest period. Many owners choose to do these at shorter intervals to keep the engine running its best. Several specialists and tuners recommend the 0W40 oil in an RS6. The VW part code is slightly different with age, but either VW50400 or VW51100 will likely be found in the owner's manual. Many owners cut down oil change intervals, especially on modified examples. The high-pressure fuel pump is beginning to get reports of failure with age. However, most reporting this are running more power. Looking back at the previous generation, the fuel pump has become a mandated replacement by many tuners if owners want more power, as they found this is usually the first part to suffer. The cooling system on the RS6 is strong, but the expansion tank and hoses around it can begin to suffer on cars driven hard. Look for any pink residue around it, and if you see it, expect new hoses and a new tank. The intercoolers have also reported heat soak when used in hot weather and launching the car repeatedly, only to then sit idle. So if you autobahn blast, this shouldn't be as much of an issue as if you put your foot down around town only to catch the traffic quicker. Again, on the cooling side, the radiator and water pump have failed on a few cars, but a high coolant temp warning will usually flash up on the dash, saving the owner from melting the engine, and finding a workshop to get the issue sorted immediately is strongly advised. Fuel pump modules have had some reports of failure or crashing. This will create an engine no start warning, and usually either needs a software flash or module replacement. Lastly, owners have mentioned some oil usage. However, in the majority of cases, this is quite a small quantity, and pressure testing has come back okay, showing that a small amount of consumption isn't a big worry. However, larger oil consumption will usually require further assessment. Now, I should say, while this generation RS6 was popular around the world, it still isn't mass-produced like the regular A6 model, and so I could see that in the reporting, there were a few outliers that can make an RS6 seem less reliable than it actually is, and why I have been thorough so you know exactly what to check. But overall, most owners have been extremely happy and say their biggest issue isn't with the car, it's how to replace it. With the next generation RS6 moving to a plug-in hybrid, it will certainly have more power, but whether it will retain the character of Rennsport and the soul of this V8 wagon, well, only time will tell. For our picks, the launch edition both adds some specification and will likely be the entry level in for pricing. If your budget can stretch, then the performance model will make this a car that you'll find hard to ever want anything more from. If the RS6 isn't for you though, there are guides for the RS4 and the RS3, and many of the larger SUVs that are regularly cross-shopped against an RS6. Either way, all the best with your car search.